pretty important that we record this because a lot of folks are depending on that to be able to see the recording later. So, well, let's start. I'm just going to welcome everybody to this session. My name is Shawn Morford. I'm the Executive Director of the Network of Oregon Watershed Councils, and my office is in Salem. I'm usually behind the scenes on these webinars, moderating, but in this case, I've been doing some investigation that I want to share with you. So Kelly Beamer has stepped in as the co-moderator on the session, and Kelly said she would turn her webcam off in a second, but I wanted to just have a chance for you guys to meet her if you haven't yet. Kelly's with the Coalition of Oregon Land Trust. She's the executive director there. So thank you, Kelly, for stepping in. Okay. And I'm assuming everybody's able to get on okay. Some of you are coming in by phone and others by computer. Everybody is muted by default, but that doesn't mean we don't want this to be as interactive as possible. I would love it if we could all just meet in a park and sit on the picnic tables and have a chat about this topic, but given that we're talking to people across the state, of course, this is the next best thing. So we're going to try and do a visualization of us being in the same space and just have this as much of a conversation as we can. There's two ways for you to participate, and one of them is to raise your little icon hand, and Kelly will be watching for your hand and will unmute you and say, go ahead, and then you can ask your question or make your comment. The other way is to type a question or comment in the question box, and Kelly will also be monitoring those. And if it's a question just for you, she'll just respond back to you, but if it's a question that's appropriate for everybody to hear, she'll interrupt me and we'll get your question in the room. So this really is the beginning of a conversation that I hope that we can continue over time. It's a big topic, and you all have different reasons for tuning in to this conversation, but I hope that this will apply, something will touch you or be an inspiration for you in this session. We all have different reasons we're doing outdoor education and different places we are in our funding reality. So this is about sharing with each other what we've learned and things that we're doing and so on. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and please feel free at any point. I want you to refute anything I'm saying that from your experience doesn't bear out on the ground, or ask a question or ask me to elaborate and tell more of a detailed part of the story related to what I'm going to share. I'm guessing that most organizations that are going to be on this webinar have some level of commitment to outdoor education, or watershed education, we can also call it, with both adults and youth, but as part of the reason that you exist as an organization. Some have it expressed in their strategic plan more explicitly, and others are just in the business of doing it. We're all in the business of doing restoration, but some of us have education as a part of our core mission. We want to influence attitudes and knowledge among the people who live in our watershed. So this webinar is a follow-up to the one that we did on June 29th with Susan Sanow from OSU Extension. She is a key leader a state leader in outdoor education, and she's pretty much my go-to person when I have questions related to outdoor school legislation or the Oregon Literacy Plan or the Environmental Education Association. There's a whole lot of pieces to this story of outdoor education in Oregon, and Susan is really a key player in that. So if you haven't had a chance to review or view her June 29 webinar that's now posted on the network website, I really encourage you to do that. She gave an overview of the tremendous momentum that we have here in Oregon for outdoor education, and she described the renewed focus across the country, really, but particularly in Oregon, for getting kids outside and how it's related in the research to human health, to academic success, to career and workforce readiness and economic development and so on. So there really is a renewed interest, not only from the usual natural resource organizations, but in the business community and in the education community and so on. So we really are at the cusp of a really exciting time in Oregon. So where I'm picking up on this is in response to the announcement from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board this spring, and many of you know that they're a key funder for a host of organizations in outdoor education, or they have been. Their announcement was that they needed to shift the eligibility for their outreach grants. And I did a little poll this spring, and I heard from 18 different councils. I'm sure there are even more, but I heard from 18 who said that they were going to feel this impact immediately in their programming, in terms of their ability to staff up, to buy supplies, and so on. So because of this immediate impact, OWEB gave the network a small technical assistance grant to really allow us to focus and investigate the options for and new approaches to funding and partnering to accomplish education goals, so that the investments that you have all done in your curricula, in your materials, in your staff is not lost for outdoor education. So I spent time this spring and early summer interviewing key state leaders in outdoor education and talking to key funders in outdoor education, reviewing websites and looking at documents such as the Oregon Literacy Plan and state standards for science and social science and so on, and attending some strategic meetings with organizations like the Gray Family Foundation. And out of that, I created a discussion paper. Originally, I thought it was going to be a guide of some kind, but realized that I'm not an expert in this area. I just had the luxury of taking time to go deep in looking into what the options are. So what you received yesterday, I hope everybody got the updated version, is really what I'm considering a living document. I will update it over time as I learn new things. We're going to keep it posted on our website. Not all the points that I cover in there are relevant for everyone, but I hope that there's some tidbits that you can pull from to help broaden your thinking about how you might go about funding your outdoor education programs. So my purpose today is not to try and interpret the OWEB rules, but to talk about the education activities that are likely not to be funded through there, and what are the options for you as organizations. And in general, what can the conservation community do to get more involved even than you are now in what's going on in the state. And in my view, those who are sort of at the center of activities going on in the state are the ones that are going to be more able to access dollars when they do become available, and they'll be in a much more strategic position. So I want to just sort of stop at this point and see if there are questions or comments, and I'm going to try and do this a couple of times, just to see if you have any questions or anything you want to say at this point. I'm just going to ask Kelly to look and see if there are any hands up or any questions that came in. We'll just take a second to do that.
Looks like there's a hands up from Teresa, but I think that was a technical issue. Is that right, Teresa? I'm just going to unmute you here and make sure. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Kelly. Okay. So here is what I found, and this is what I believe to be true. And again, I would love to hear from you if your experience bears something different, because we need to learn from each other about this. What I believe to be true as I looked into this and talked to funders is that the bad news is that there is no single one-stop source of funding that is going to come in and replace what we don't have now from the OWEB outreach grants. No funder I talked to said, yeah, you know, we've heard about this shift in OWEB eligibility requirements, and just have people send us, you know, send us their applications instead of sending them to OWEB. No funder came and did that. So there is no knight in shining armor to save us. However, and this is a big however, I believe, and I would love to hear if you agree or don't agree, that with some reframing, with some creating new, what I'm going to call unlikely partnerships, I believe that there are opportunities for conservation organizations that have a commitment to education to continue doing that education. But it's for some councils and districts and others, it's not going to look the same. If you are accustomed to having that source from OWEB, you are really going to have to, you will look different if you continue doing your education. So there's going to be some groundwork in developing these new partnerships, because with new communities, and I'm going to call them communities, and I'll explain that in a minute, there are new terminology and new systems and new organizations. So for example, if you want to access the arts community, wow, you walk into that room, that door, that room is very big. There's arts organizations, and they have their own lingo, their own measures of success, their own people that you have to get to know. So this is not going to be an easy shift, but I think it is possible to do. It's going to make us way more engaged, even than we already are as a conservation organization community, in understanding the Oregon Literacy Plan, in understanding the kinds of things that teachers are on the hook to perform with their kids related to science standards and social science standards. And I think we're going to be more active on these regional leadership teams for the Oregon Literacy Plan. And that's a concept that Susan Sanau talked about in the June 29 webinar a lot, is how councils and districts and land trusts can get more involved in leadership roles in environmental education community. Susan made it really clear when she talked on June 29th that the momentum for outdoor education is supported across the state. It crosses urban and rural, it crosses east side, west side. And this is evidenced by the fact that 34 of the 36 counties in Oregon, 2/3 of voters approved Measure 99 in last November for establishing outdoor schools. And this is an exciting wave, and it's enviable across the country to have state legislative support or Oregon voter support, and then subsequently, and I'll talk about this in a minute, legislative support for outdoor school. In my conversations with state leaders, it appears to the state leaders almost consistently that in any given region, there are a number of organizations doing outdoor education, but they're competing and they're not well coordinated within their region. And watershed councils and districts and land trusts seem to fall into this camp. And we know that funders like and prefer and respond well to collective efforts. And funders don't know what to do when they get a bunch of proposals from the same region from small organizations to do similar kinds of things. They think, well, why aren't they working together to put together one stronger proposal that would allow us to make a bigger program with bigger impact that all of them could benefit from? So this concept of leadership and collaboration, I just can't underscore that enough with regards to what the state leaders are saying. It's time, I mean, many of you are already doing this in a big way. And I'm just saying that we need to continue doing this, and we need to start developing relationships in organizations that we may have never played with before. So I'm going to stop there and ask for any comments or questions. Do you think I'm just nuts, or do you think that you agree with some of these points? Love to hear.
All right. It looks like we've got a question from Liesl. I'm going to unmute.
Great. Hi, Liesl.
It's not so much a question as I think you're bang on, and certainly in our conversations with representatives from like the Oregon Community Foundation, there's a lot of talk about, you know, they want to see partnerships, they want to see people efficiencies, if you will, sharing the work rather than all of these little tribes coming and trying to get money to do their own little individual tiny thing. And the tricky piece is, part of the reason there are all these little tribes is people have different ideas about how things need to get done. And once you get them all into the room, that can not go so great. And that's just my comment, but yeah, the partnership thing, that's the message we've been getting down here as well.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. You can imagine being on the funder side and being on one of these review committees where you're looking at these proposals and they come in, and what do you do with them? I mean, you want to call them up and say, well, we might fund you guys if you would work together on this. And some funders do that. But it's not just the state leaders who have described this, the funders that have described this. I've heard this from watershed councils too, that their experience is that they've been told this, and they observe it as well. So, okay, any other before I jump into some of my other findings? Thanks so much, Lisa.
We have a question from Corelia, and there she's
Perfect
unmuted.
Pronunciation.
So.
Hi guys, I'm down here in Southern Oregon in Jackson County, and I agree with you so much, Sean, in that we do need to work on that collaboration and leadership. I was just at, I don't know, those of you that know So Real, Southern Oregon Regional Environmental Education Leaders, but this is a kind of an ad hoc group that came together because they were seeing this exact thing of competition for events and funds and stepping on each other's toes. And so I think it's just a matter of, you know, speaking to one another, realizing that, like Lisa was saying, even though we have different ideas, our goal is the same. So I think it's really important for maybe people to realize that collaboration is the way to do it, especially as funds get tighter federally. I know that the district I'm working at right now, we're starting to be seen as a kind of a honeypot for everybody, so we really have to make sure, you know, that these projects are collaborating in a way that that everyone is getting, you know, the biggest bang for the buck. So I think you're not crazy. You're right on track with that.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. So what I want to share is next is just where I think that the door is starting to open, and that the innovative organizations are going to stick their foot in the door and hold it open and try and crack it open a little bit further. And so I want to just talk about 4 different ones, and then I would love to hear if there are others that you would point to as well. And the one, of course, that's maybe the most obvious is related to outdoor school. And I will point to Susan's webinar on June 29th. She goes into a lot of detail about how councils and districts, in that case, can really get on board with that. But at the time that Susan gave her session on the 29th of June, we didn't know whether the Oregon State Legislature was going to approve funding for outdoor school. And since then, we know it has been successful. So the state legislature approved $24 million for the next biennium to school districts and education service districts, which serve as like the county school districts, to write applications to be able to launch, expand, or start their outdoor schools. And so these dollars are not available to conservation organizations to apply for. You can't just decide you're going to do an outdoor school. It has to be done through a school district or an ESD. The good news for us in conservation community is that these outdoor schools this funding is not prescriptive. In other words, there is no state curriculum that school districts have to abide to. They can do their own locally derived curricula for outdoor school if they're going to go ahead with this. And so that means that they could have a focus that is relevant to the players in their area that are able to help develop the curriculum, relevant to curricula that's already developed, and rely on or use resources that are already in place. So those organizations that already have staff, expertise, materials and supplies, curricula, relationships, etc., are in a really good position to work and partner with school districts to deliver the outdoor school programs. Now that is not going to be true for every council and district and land trust, because some councils have expressed to me they feel for their goals getting involved in outdoor school is like driving through Florida to get to California. It's just it's peripheral to what their goals are to get involved in all the other broad aspects of outdoor school. But I mentioned outdoor school first because it is the game in town right now. It's the biggest game in town, maybe not the only game, but we would be remiss if we didn't at least stick our foot in that door and see if there's an opportunity. So we've been advised to advise you that you should be on the phone, if you're not already, with your ESD. Could be your administrator at the ESD, could be the office administrator. We don't know who at the ESD in each case is going to be the key lead. But you want to find out if that district, those districts within that ESD are starting to look at maybe we want to put in for this. $24 million per biennium is about half of what is needed for every school to put every 5th and 6th grader in the outdoor school. But that's half. And there's not half of the schools out there that are ready to go and have their own staffing and so on. So this might be an immediate opportunity for some councils, districts, and land trusts to get on board with now. So that's why I mentioned this first. It's not going to work for everybody, but at least it's worth having a look around to see who's active. Comments and questions on that one, I'd love to hear. Are some of you already doing this? Having these conversations? Is there a question from you, Tracy? Am I seeing that?
Tracy has in the question box, what is ESD?
Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, very good. All right, so in the state of Oregon, so the question was, what is an ESD? So good question, thank you. There are schools, and then there are school districts, and then there are ESDs. So these are levels of administrative structure for the schools in Oregon. So an ESD supports a bunch of school districts, usually within a county, and they're curriculum specialists, and they play a supportive role for the school districts in their area. And so in some cases, outdoor school is going to be administered out of the ESD office. In some cases, it might be more decentralized. by school district. But the ESD is a good place to start. And so, for example, in Jefferson County, there's an ESD office right next to the high school, and they have access to all the school districts within the county. So, good question. Thank you.
It looks like we have another question from Angela Clegg. Go ahead, Angela.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure with the microphone. So it's not really a question, it's just a comment. So here in the South San EM, I work with 2 different school districts, and we've been coordinating their outdoor schools for quite a few years. So we've already had this conversation, and I've just been set and ready to go for the emails to come out. And when we do the application, so we are currently working right now with our school districts because we've already been in this role for quite a while. And so, and my big concern, which I'm sure we might get to it in this webinar, is not really the outdoor school, because we have that down to science. We were just waiting to figure out how to fund it. But we have like a pretty prolific high school program that has nothing to do with outdoor school. So that's kind of more, that's where our OWEB funding helped out with, and that's kind of where we're losing it. So, you know, and I know we're going to get to different topics, but as far as outdoor school, having that relationship with your school district is definitely 100% on. We have a really good partnership with the Forest Service, ODFW for our outdoor school. So it's that partnership part of it, especially with outdoor school and going into it, it is definitely kind of a key factor, and we have found that here. That's the reason we've been so successful for so many years. So.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that story and your question. Okay, I'm going to move on then to, I'm doing on time, Kelly, already 10:30. So the other category that I want to share with you, this is based on my observation and my conversations, that, and I'm going to use this word again, the unlikely partners. And my observation, when I went through the list of OWEB-funded outreach grants that were related to outdoor education, and I would say largely, not completely, but largely, the partners were what I would call the likely partners: U.S. Forest Service, ODF&W, OSU Extension, Oregon State Parks, basically the natural resource agencies. And so I think my thesis is that there is a huge untapped array of less likely or unlikely partners that would be interested in hearing from us. And I'll explain a few of those examples in just a minute. But I would love to do a contest to see, you know, what watershed council or district would have the most outrageous type of partnership, like the most unlikely people to be working together. If you have a chance to look at the document I sent yesterday, I suggested a 45-minute session that you could do with your staff and or board that I used to teach when I teach the Ford Institute Leadership Program, and it was the most innovative or the most inspiring type of conversation to get people thinking about new ways of partnering. And basically, you take a whole bunch of different organizations that might exist inside your watershed, and they could be everything from the local prison to the police department to the senior center, everything you can think of. And then you blindfold somebody, and they go up and choose 6 different organizations, and then you go back to your table and try and create a partnership with the Watershed Council in this case to create an outdoor education program. So it really, everybody groans when they see the list of partners that they have to figure out how to fit in. But it's extremely motivating to realize, oh, there is a role for even the ones that we didn't think were anywhere close to having our interests. It just helps stretch our thinking. So it's a lot of fun to do, and it is a way to begin to think about those unlikely partners. I didn't see, when I looked at the list of OWEB-funded programs. I didn't see any organizations, there might have been some there that I missed, but I didn't see many or none partnering with anything related to culture and heritage or the arts. And I went to the Oregon Cultural Trust website, and I know that the Oregon Cultural Trust provides local grants for cultural programs. And I realized that on their website, they have a list of almost 1,500 nonprofits, and you can search by county, that deal with cultural programs. They're by youth, by heritage. There's a whole bunch of different topics. And so that might be just a place to go to begin to think about who are the new players that we haven't played with before. Oregon Arts Commission has an arts education program, so getting involved with that office in Salem to help think about what are the arts organizations in your area that might be interested in doing art about watersheds. Economic development corporations, chambers of commerce around workforce and career development stuff, tourism, the Federation of Western Outdoor Clubs has a directory on their website. I think it's searchable by county or at least by state. And so I think, since water touches every aspect of life, recreation, economic development, history, human health, and so on, my theory is that there's an untapped number of partners out there that we haven't even really, we haven't seen the potential yet. And doesn't mean it's going to be easy to find them, but I think they're out there. That's my theory and my hope. One of those that was a little bit of a surprise when I started looking into this was something that's happening, a conversation that's happening with the healthcare sector right now. And some of you know Bobby Cochran, who is the executive director of the Willamette Partnership. He was a keynote speaker at last year's Outdoor Education Summit in Portland. And his key message was that he believes, through his own research, that there is an intersection between health outcomes and outdoor education. That research shows that nature education and other factors like social cohesion and mental health and other things that are related are strong drivers of health outcomes, and that the health industry is starting to really jump on board with this. He did an assessment in the Willamette Valley, and this summer they stretched that assessment across the state to kind of look at the feasibility of conservation organizations working with nonprofit hospitals that are on the hook to do what they call community benefits. So hospitals that are tax exempt have to give back to the community in some way to keep their tax exempt status. And this is a fascinating concept. Like, I don't know, I've never worked with the health sector before in my field. Bobby warns, wow, you can't just walk up to a hospital and say, can you fund our existing program? It's a conversation that happens. What are your goals? How do you want to do nature education, and how does it affect health outcomes? So again, it's not going to look the same as it did before, but there might be an opportunity to be a funded partner with a nonprofit hospital in your watershed or in your region. And it may be more than one organization working together to have this relationship happen with the hospital. I don't know. Bobby is going to do a webinar for us on August 24th to talk about this assessment that he's done and his findings, and to give us some very concrete hints on how to get started with this. And he's bringing in somebody else who's been working on this assessment with him, and that'll be on August 24th at 10 o'clock for about 45 minutes. So I welcome you to be part of that webinar. We'll be advertising it in the same way that we advertised this one. In fact, I think we've already gotten the link out. A few people have registered already. Okay, I'm going to pause a second again and see if there are any comments, rebuttals, any experience with health sector, I see.
Sean, this is Kelly at the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. There's some really neat examples from Montana we've seen of land trusts partnering with local healthcare providers for sort of a nature RX, where the physicians are literally prescribing outdoor time, and they're able to hand out, maps of local natural areas and connect them to land trust properties, other protected properties, and it's been really neat. So I'm really excited to hear from Bobby. Appreciate you organizing that.
So that's great. I wonder if he knows about what's going on in Montana. You said Montana?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, neat. Okay. Okay, anybody else? Isn't it funny how you can look at a PowerPoint 100 times and not see that you've repeated a word? Health sector. Yeah. Okay, the last one I want to talk about in terms of the door cracking open is an idea that comes from a couple of organizations that I know are already doing this. I have a colleague who started a nonprofit organization about 20 years ago in Southern California called the Wilderness Institute. And for many years, their bread and butter from a funding standpoint was doing nature-based birthday parties. And the first time I heard of this, I could hardly believe that they could actually make this as a moneymaker. But I actually attended one of their birthday parties, and what he described is that there are working parents who want to do something special for their kids, but they don't want to plan it all. They don't even have time to make the cake, but they want it to be a meaningful experience. So I contacted my colleagues in California, and I also heard through the grapevine and followed up with them that the Portland Parks and Rec department also does nature-based birthday parties. And I don't know if any of you have had contact with any of those events as a parent or just as a partner with them. But this is what I call the Chuck E. Cheese approach, because you can go in there and have a party. They charge between $14 and $25 per child, depending on what they get for that. But it's a full meal deal. I mean, they get the cake, they get the activities. In Chuck E. Cheese's case, it's not necessarily educational, but in the case of the Wilderness Institute in Southern California, they absolutely make it educational and fun, of course, but there are some key messages that they try and make sure are brought out in their programs. Portland Parks and Rec does about 20 of these a year, and they charge between $80 and $150, depending on how many kids they have. They don't do it in the summertime because of other programming, so that they're short-staffed in the summer. And they told us they believe that they could double or more their number of birthday parties if they had decided to do this in the summertime. But the word from the person who does this in Portland said, parents say that it's cheaper than renting a pool. So they see it from an economic standpoint as much as their priority for getting kids into nature. So it's a real win-win for families and for the organization. So is there an opportunity for fee-based programming? Maybe there is. I don't think it's the solution, but it might be one of your diverse sources of programming that would be a little bit out of the ordinary. And it might require organizations working together in smaller population centers. You might offer your services to a neighboring watershed council or something of that nature to make it pay in a smaller population center. But anyway, I'm just offering that as an observation and a suggestion to consider thinking about. So comments on that or any other, other than writing grant proposals to, funders to keep your existing programs going, which we can talk about in just a second. Are there any other sort of out of the ordinary things that you are considering or that you want to share with others about this? Anybody? Kelly showing up at all?
Not on this particular one. I know
Okay.
Teresa did have a comment that I think she shared that I think is valuable. Just the point about connecting with local farm bureaus, that they have a county chapter structure that's really it's really well organized, and that sort of as an existing partnership infrastructure out there as well. And they have annual projects, so that's a great point.
Yeah.
Just a time check. We're coming up on the quarter till, so I wanted to just make sure.
All right. I'm just about ready to close out my thoughts. So I wish that there was a silver bullet for how to find a funder that's going to keep your existing programs going. I don't have that. Having said that, I did include a list of funders in the document, and I want to emphasize that they are the reason that they're included, or those that are included, the reason that they're there is because they have a history of funding these kinds of programs. But every relationship with a funder is unique, and so having conversations with the program officers of these organizations about your existing program, there's no shortcut for doing that. So I think one of the things that I've learned over the years about grants and funders that are in the business of supporting these kinds of programs, they're more accessible than I ever imagined. They want to hear from proponents about their ideas. So calling a program officer on the phone to say, I've got an existing program, I used to be funded in this way, we're looking at new partnerships, but we're also poking around to see if this funding source or if your mission as your foundation is relevant. Should we put an application in with you? I would absolutely have those conversations ahead of time. I know, especially early in my career, I would say I was a little bit shy, and I thought, well, funders don't want to hear from me. And it's true, there are some funders that say, please don't call us, because they get so many. But that's not the majority in my experience. So having conversations ahead of time just to explore ideas and asking funders for their advice about how your program might be more be a better fit for their mission, I think is time well worth investing in. I'd be happy to have any one-on-one conversations about your particular program and help explore some ideas. Again, I'm not a development person. I don't have a background any more than you do, but I've probably been at it 30 years. And so there might be some funding sources that I could become available, that I could point you to that are available. One of the things that the Network of Oregon Watershed Councils is doing is we are looking at ourselves now as a potential flow-through for funding dollars. So in some cases, it's easier for a statewide organization to contact these funders and to say, how can we help you not have to look at 30 Watershed Council grants, but to actually be a hub of some kind. So we are starting to have those conversations, such as with Spirit Mountain Community Fund. but I wouldn't have that stop you from having a phone call with them individually. So I just want to quickly summarize. So what I've learned in the last 3 months in my talking with funders and reading is that there's no substitute for getting involved in the outdoor education community statewide, that getting involved in leadership takes time, yes, but I think the dividends really pay off in terms of your ability to be at the forefront when new partnerships and funding opportunities come along. I think that there's a great benefit for getting together regionally. Get together if you're a watershed council, call your SWCD folks, your land trust folks, and have a convening with them. Feel free to invite the OSU Oregon Environmental Literacy Program staff. They said they would try to come if you held this, and they can help brainstorm ideas with you. Keep tabs on the funding sources that are in that document. They will be changing over time. Track your outcomes. Look for ways to be able to document the work that you do and the outcomes that you have. In order to get funding, having good impact data is really critical. One more thing I wanted to point out that Susan brought to my attention is that you can add your organization or your name to the teacher resource page or the educator resource page, if you haven't already, that is on the Oregon Literacy Program page. So I see there's a few watershed councils that are there already. Coos is on there. And it outlines the programs that you have and that you'd be available to help with. That's not a source of funding, but it is getting you out there and being sort of in the forefront of what's going on in outdoor education in the state positions you better than if you're not doing that. So I think that may be the end of my comments. I'm going to just one more time ask for any other experiences, comments, things you want to push back on. Yeah.
There's a question from Kathy McQueenie, I think is a good one. Just recognizing that we haven't seen any National Fish and Wildlife Service mentioned as a potential funding. Is that because their funding in Willamette Valley comes through Ponneville Power, or what about some of the other national agency partners? Did you explore that at all?
To be honest, I can't remember. I know NIFWIF has been a big funder in the past, but what I will do is, what I want to hear from you is, who didn't I talk to? and I would be happy to look into those. So this is exactly what I want to take. I can't remember what NIFWIF told me when I did talk with them early on, but why they're not on the list, I can't remember. It could just be an oversight.
Okay. Looks like just checking in about a question from Tess, who's with Willamette Partnership, the conservation nonprofit that you referenced, that Bobby leads, connecting health with outdoor education. She wanted to share that they also have a project that publishes kindergarten through college, watershed-related art and writing in a publication called Honoring Our Rivers. We don't have funding, but she'd love to partner with more watershed councils towards this aim.
Lovely. Okay. Yeah.
That's great.
Great. And so what's the contact for that? Should people call you? No, you're not with them now, but who should they call at the Willamette Partnership now? Should they call Bobby?
Oh, let's see. Bobby for health, and Tess for honoring our rivers. So
Okay,
maybe, Sean, you can
good.
send that out as a follow-up.
Sure. All right. Tess, I'll need to get your contact. Or actually, I have it. As a registrant of this, I have your email. So I'll be in touch with you, and then I'll send that information out to everybody else. Good.
One more question, Sean, from Liesel. Any ideas about how to structure effective brainstorming session with new regional partners would be really helpful.
Okay. And Liesel, okay, that's great. I'll follow up with you on that. I would love to know more about brainstorming to do what. I think if you've had a chance to see that little exercise in the document, I think that's a great first place to start. It's just thinking about different partnerships, but it depends on what you want to brainstorm and with whom.
It sounds like just what you were talking about earlier, Sean, in terms of funders really wanting to see a partnership application. Maybe to Liesel's question, how would you actually structure a gathering and put that together, go from kind of the individual application to a partnership application?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll put some thought into that, and I'll send you all an email. There's lots of different approaches for doing a gathering like that. You know, in the very beginning, just getting to know what each organization's key interests are. I mean, this is true for any collaboration, not necessarily related to outdoor education, but having everybody just give a brief introduction to their organization and what are their key drivers, what are the things that they get brownie points for accomplishing, and then having somebody list those out and do a little bit of Venn diagram comparing, so you see where the overlap is in those interests. So that's one way to start. But I'll give a more nuanced response to that, Liesel, and to everybody. That's a great question. Thanks. Any more, Kelly?
So last chance to raise your hand if anyone has questions, or you can type it into the question box.
Okay. Great.
Any new questions?
I would love some feedback. We're not going to do a little survey at the end here, but I would love if you have some feedback for us on this webinar, suggestions for future topics, ways to make it interactive, etc. I would love to hear. So my email, again, if I can just scroll up, right there. Sean@OregonWatersheds.org is my email. So please be in touch. And the more we talk to each other, the stronger that our outcomes will be. So really appreciate the chance to share what I've developed as series, and to hear some of your experiences and contacts as well. So thank you, Kelly, for helping out with this, and we'll be in touch, everybody, later.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay, bye for now.